Vice President-elect Victoria Newman's scientist husband, Dr. Samir Shah, wakes up in a safe house where he's being held by Butcher and his CIA buddy, Joe. Butcher coerces Samir into making more of the soup-killing virus developed at Godolphin University. Showing off the rotting head of one of the super lambs, Newman had Samir enhancing with Compound V to test the virus's ability to neutralize it. Samir is still upset that Butcher amputated one of his legs and chained him up. Joe toes the hard line that the scientist can either cooperate or get obliterated. The tough talk turns sour when Butcher has a coughing fit. He gives Samir a week to develop a new virus, one strong enough to even take down Homelander. Butcher departs, warning Joe not to let Samir fall asleep again. Joe looks eager to carry out the instruction. Ashes to Manhattan, dust to dust. Huey and his mother Daphne are leading their version of a funeral procession with the boys' team. By taking the ashes of Huey's dad, Hugh to be distributed at various stops along the NYC tour of locations used in the 2002 J-Lo rom-com film Made in Manhattan. The two talk about what the future looks like for them, with Daphne promising she can be in the city at a moment's notice at any time. While Huey swears he's doing fine and wants her to return to her life, they both joke about how they hate Made in Manhattan. Daphne looks over the faces of the boys' team members. Puzzled, she lands on Kimiko, Karen Fukuhara, and asks what's up with her. Huey tactlessly spills all the tea about how Frenchie just turned himself in for a countless murder committed at the behest of a Russian mob boss, and how Kimiko is upset he didn't ask for her blessing first. Daphne is bewildered, asking emphatically, WTF Huey's friends are. The conversation gets tabled when a political agitator starts accosting Starlight about her abortion. Huey gets angry and aggressive, but Annie talks him down, with Daphne calling the protester a posse. The tour guide urges that such moments aren't part of the tour and urges the group to continue. Kimiko goes to see Frenchie in jail, but gets upset when a group that came in after her gets called in for visitation. Kimiko storms the front desk, pointing out the unfairness of getting skipped over. After giving her info to the clerk, she finds out that Frenchie is actively refusing any visitation. Over on Vought's news network, the new member of the Seven Firecracker announces that she's taking over the news desk from Cameron Cole, without spilling the tea that Homelander had the Seven and some General V allies beat Coleman to death as a first salvo in their war to conquer and control humanity. Firecracker's first segment about Jewish space lasers proves she will go the fake news sensationalism route. Meanwhile, Mother's Milk is trying to mediate in the boys' HQ, only to get interrupted by a phone call from A-Train. A-Train is freaking out after Sister Sage leaned on him with her suspicions that A-Train stole the footage that proved Starlight's followers didn't kill some Homelander extremist. He confesses the Cameron Coleman murder and claims he ran all the way to Canada to hide out and avoid being killed. Finishes the call and brings the issue to the rest of the team. Together they discern that Sister Sage and Homelander are amassing an army of soups. A-Train clocked Sage plotting with Tech Knight during the V-52 Expo, and that is a seam they can creep through. Introduces a plan to infiltrate a high society party Tech Knight is throwing that night, and they can get to their foes. Annie kicks herself but suggests that they need Butcher on this. But claims he's totally missing in action. Annie asks Huey if he should be in the field so soon after the trauma of losing his father, but Hugh claims he's managing it fine. Huey wants to know how the boys sneak into an alt-right party, and has a suggestion. Web Weaver. Meets the degenerate Web Weaver with a fresh dose of drugs, but refuses to apply the suppository himself until he realizes it's necessary. Gets the drugs into the butt, but has to see Web Weaver's web hole in the process, and catches a wet web in the face after a fart. Web Weaver passes out again happily, while Huey helps collect the gross Spider-Man knockoff for the mission. Homelander walks into a party at Tech Knight's old money mansion with Ryan at his side. Tech Knight raises a toast to Homelander, calling him the big man, and the crowd of business, government, and financial power players all join in. Homelander waves off the adulation, claiming we're all patriots here, and works the crowd, introducing Ryan as some members of the Seven file in behind him. The Speaker of the House talks Ryan up, telling him he can't wait for his era of leading the Seven, and that he has big boots to fill following his father. Tech Knight approaches Homelander, pitching a Batman-Superman team-up of the two top heroes, but Homelander knocks that down, putting Tech Knight in his place as a pathetic hero with low-level powers of observation. Ashley walks in dressed to kill, and Sister Sage approaches her, asking why she hasn't gotten the memo that idiot kids are no longer welcome at the adults' table. Ashley smiles and says her invite came from her old friend Tech Knight and bypasses Sage entirely. Knight, Firecracker, and a train talk, with Knight clarifying for Firecracker that his mansion comes from old money, slave catcher old money, which makes a train eye roll. Knight keeps going, saying how he's the modern-day version of the family business, catching criminals and locking them up only for them to get away, so he can lock them up all over again. He looks a train up and down, saying how the speedster would have given his family a merry chase, but that they still would have caught him in the end. A train eats his hours d'oeuvre and smiles, saying, "Guess we'll never know." Huey steps out to reveal himself in Webweaver's costume, which makes all of the boys' squad laugh. The team prepares to send Huey undercover into Tech Knight's party, with MM reminding Huey that Tech has super senses, a caveat that makes Annie freak out a little. MM warns Huey to disguise his voice, and Huey assures Annie that he's ready. Annie goes to kiss him, but Webweaver's costume is indeed too ripe. Huey arrives at the mansion party in disguise and is welcomed with champagne. Huey freaks a little when he spots Homelander and the Seven at the party, but MM begs him to just plant the surveillance bugs and get out. Huey literally bumps into Victoria Newman and is very flustered trying to talk to her. Luckily, Newman is more concerned with his smell than his voice and mannerisms and quickly moves on. Tech Knight approaches and thanks Webweaver for coming and for considering some kind of offer to be a sidekick. Huey changes the subject, acting like he's impressed with the mansion, and gets Tech Knight to take him on a tour. Newman huddles up with Sage and Homelander, with Sage making a vulgar comment about Newman looking like she got sodomized with a hammer. Newman responds that she doesn't want to be at the Conservative Political Action Conference nightmare, with a bunch of conservatives that hate her. Homelander puts Newman in the loop about a secret cabal meeting after the party, where Homelander will unveil his plot to use the 25th Amendment to make Newman a soup president. A radical escalation of the timeline Newman isn't ready for. Homelander asks Cooley if she wants to be El Jefe or not, and Newman falls in line. Sage points out that in this room Newman is the virgin at prom, and instructs her to go get finger-popped by working the crowd of donors and powerful figures. Homelander pulls Newman aside and asks if she knows about Stan Edgar getting out of prison, and feels her out on her involvement. Newman plays it off, saying she's surprised Stan didn't escape sooner, and jabs Homelander by assuring him not to be afraid of Stan. They stare at each other, smiling in complete distrust. Huey is led up a flight of stairs by Tech Knight, admiring artwork along the way. Tech takes him to a fancy library and invites him for a true treat, a tour of the Tech Cave. A bookshelf moves to reveal an elevator, and Huey and Tech head down as the boys' squad listens in concern, especially when Huey's comms are blocked by the elevator. Tech leads Huey into the Tech Cave, which turns out to be a torture sex room covered in tile. The man who greeted Huey at the door is revealed as Tech's butler, Elijah, the Alfred to his Batman, who is hosing down the floor in preparation. Tech gets angry at Elijah for missing a dirty spot in one cage. Someone Tech identifies as his last sidekick is trapped in a red bodysuit, gagged and chained to the wall. Tech uses his super sight to observe Webweaver's rapid heartbeat, asking if he's agitated. Huey plays it off, and Tech says he knows that his dungeon is vanilla for Webweaver's tastes, but that tonight they will push things to match his standards. Tech approaches seductively, while the former sidekick tries to protest. The Deep enters the Seven's council room and finds the actor playing Black Noir 2 unmasked and chugging a bottle of booze. Deep is scared they'll get in trouble, but Noir doesn't care, pointing out they've been left behind as the rest of the team goes to the party. Deep maintains that he's an important part of the team who does important stuff, but won't confirm what that is. Black Noir 2 angrily explains that he has no motivation for the character, since all he found in Black Noir Eye's home was a collection of Buster Beaver drawings. Noir 2 reveals his going to Branson, Missouri, where he booked a Cirque du Soleil-style show based on the music of the Bee Gees, where they will let him use his actual superpower of flight. Deep is upset that Noir 2 didn't come to him. As he was friends with Noir Eye, he tells Noir 2 the story of how Noir Eye wiped out an entire Indonesian village once, and how horny Noir Eye got from killing. Deep shares that even though people laugh at him, when he beats them to death, nobody laughs anymore. Violence is power. Noir 2 takes that info in thoughtfully. Annie is freaking out that they lost contact with Huey, with MM trying to calm her. MM warns her against going in and blowing Huey's cover. Annie points out that Homelander and the Seven are on site, The game has changed. Kimiko is down to back her up, and MM agrees, but only if they use the proper weaponry. Meanwhile, Butcher is throwing up in a sink at his safe house. Becca appears to him, asking how Butcher was able to sever a man's legs so easily. Butcher states it's the only way forward to getting a Homelander. But Becca asks if he's still on the real mission, saving Ryan, or just out for vengeance. Butcher confesses that he's coming apart because he can't save the world and make her proud. Becca counters that even if his mission succeeds, killing Homelander will most likely inspire Ryan to become his successor. Back at Night Mansion, Kimiko scales a wall to a high window that's been left open, dropping her gun on the way. She lets the boys squad in a side door. Newman is listening to the Speaker of the House mansplain his anti-abortion stance, while Imogene using her powers to plow up her own head. She finds a waiter and orders a rapid-fire succession of tequila shots before coming to Sage's side, feeling like her bid for government power is pointless. Sage tells a story about how her grandmother had leukemia, and none of the white doctors made an effort since she was an ex-Black Panther. Using her intelligence powers, Sage found a cure and presented it to the doctors, who laughed her off. While her grandma died in pain, she reveals that she could fix the entire world. But it is indeed pointless because humans are savages that would inevitably ruin it all over again. She confides in Newman that she feels a kinship with her because they're both little girls who understand advancement through duplicity, shaking with one hand and cutting throats with the other. Sage asks directly if Newman is in on the alliance, and Newman seems to agree to it. Firecracker doesn't like all the fancy food at the party and thinks Homelander, Sage, and Newman will agree. She ends up embarrassing herself, and Sage bids her to go to the kitchen and find Sunny D and Everclear. Firecracker walks off humiliated. Homelander wonders aloud where Tech Knight has gotten to. In the kitchen, we see Elijah's hands lift a cake and then cut to him setting that cake down inside the Tech cave. Tech tells Webweaver that the cake is his fetish favorite, triple chocolate, to create the right texture on butt cheeks. Huey gets increasingly concerned when Tech straps himself into a choke chain and hangs freely, bidding him to start. Huey drops his pants and sits on the cake, squirming for Tech's sick pleasure. When Tech orders him to fart, Huey struggles but gets the job done. Tech releases himself as Ashley enters. Angry that they've started early and goes to get changed, Tech gives Huey a piece of sandpaper for what comes next and orders him to clean himself up. Joe walks in on Butcher sitting on the floor, defeated, joking about pleasuring himself and getting serious about how hard it is breaking Samir. Butcher says Samir has no choice but to eventually break. Joe sits with Butcher and starts in about how no one has a choice, about how the hardest part of doing his last tour of military service was coming home and trying to do normal family man stuff. The memory of all the torture he and Butcher did in the war haunted him in normal life. Then one night, over boneless buffalo wings, he realized he was a man who enjoyed hurting others. He asks Butcher who he really is. Back in Tech's dungeon, Ashley is tickling a bound-up Huey's feet with a feather before going full dominatrix, promising to sit on his face and pee and other such painful perversions, ranging to cannibalism. Huey begs her to stop, but Tech reminds Ashley that it's not the safe word, so she keeps going. The tickling continues as Huey tries to call out the rendezvous word for rescue, not realizing the team can't hear him. Firecracker is composing herself in a bathroom and comes out to find Starlight creeping around. Annie still can't manifest her powers, and Firecracker threatens to call Homelander, or just beat Annie down herself. Annie gives a heartfelt apology to Firecracker before shoving a needle in her neck and knocking her out. Ashley tickles Webweaver until she climaxes, making out passionately with Tech Knight, who is also very aroused. Ashley takes a break to recharge her fluids, wiping some of her orgasm on the face of Webweaver's mask, left alone with Tech. Huey feigns enjoyment, asking if he got the sidekick gig. Tech inquires what Webweaver's safe word is, noticing how nervous Huey is getting. When Huey can't guess the safe word, Tech unmasks him. Recognizing Huey, Huey begs that Tech was his favorite hero as a kid as Tech gets out a tray of knives, but Tech is a sociopath, saying every one of his victims says the same. Huey screams. MM and Kimiko retrace their way through Tech's mansion, based on Huey's descriptions over comms. They get to the library and find Sage, who MM holds at gunpoint while Kimiko searches for the switch that opens the secret elevator. Sage gets in MM's head, revealing she's been watching his family and his daughter Janine's recent troubles with violence at school. Sage blames Janine's behavior on MM and tries to run, but MM drops her with a gunshot to the head as Kimiko gets the elevator open. Killing Sage makes MM have a panic attack and drop to the floor unconscious, leaving Kimiko scrambling for help. Even as Sage's brain starts to heal, Kimiko signals a train, who comes up to find laid out. Kimiko argues with a train using library books as her words, convincing a train to get to a hospital with his super speed. Annie runs in, confused as all hell. Kimiko gets her on the elevator, and they get down to the Tech Cave just before Tech is about to start cutting into Huey. Kimiko dropkicks Tech Knight into the wall. A train gets to a hospital, only to be spotted and admired by some little kids outside. A-Train smiles before he runs off. Homelander walks in to find Sage nursing her head, wondering where the 7 are. Sage quickly outs herself as a dummy, and Homelander sees the bullet hole in her head. He orders her to get a grip, freaking out internally for a second before he decides he's going to go solo. Homelander starts a speech to the crowd, introducing his plan to use the 25th Amendment to get President-elect Robert Singer out of office the moment he gets in. A wealthy elite woman wants to cut through the propaganda about wokeness and such, and have Homelander lay out an actual plan to deal with the Justice Department. The financial guys start going off about market collapse, and the speaker wants to know how the populace will be kept in line. Homelander throws to Sage, who is shoving cupcakes in her face, so Newman steps up and claims the mantle of leadership, saying that America is no true democracy because the citizens are stupid. By the wealthy elite and corporations hold it together. The billionaires go for it, and Newman secures her power. Homelander is losing it, having squandered his power play. In the Tech Cave, Tech wakes to find Annie and Kimiko ready to torture him. He threatens Homelander's retaliation, but Kimiko and Annie start stabbing him, which only makes Tech Knight horny. Huey backs them off, wondering how they torture a masochist. Knight's former sidekick finally breaks free and runs to a nearby computer, showing the boys that it holds all Tech Knight's bank accounts, accessed by a retinal scan. They force Tech's eyes open and get to the money, sending donations to all liberal and charitable causes. The threat of a massive donation to Black Lives Matter breaks Knight, forcing him to confess that Homelander and Sage are going to use his prisons as internment camps when they take over. Kimiko donates the money to BLM, and Elijah suddenly appears and strangles Tech Knight to death, confessing how hard it was to serve him for years, and offering to make it look like Tech had a self-pleasure romp gone bad, so the boys can escape. The boys thank Elijah and the sidekick, and depart on the elevator. Wakes in the hospital thinking he had a heart attack, but the doctor confirms it was a panic attack and orders him to stop whatever lifestyle he's living. Kimiko once again tries to visit Frenchie in prison, telling the skeptical guard that she has nowhere else to go. Firecracker approaches Homelander and tells him that Starlight was at the party and that Tech Knight is dead. Firecracker uses it as an opportunity to throw Sage under the bus, pointing out she must have found the wrong leak in Cameron Coleman. However, Homelander turns on Firecracker for letting Starlight escape, accusing her of being the leak. Firecracker reminds him that he made her famous and powerful and that she worships him as her savior. Homelander insists he doesn't want her sexually when Firecracker starts to unzip her shirt. But Firecracker says she's proving loyalty and squirts breast milk onto Homelander's face. Homelander is shocked, then aroused, asking how it's possible. And Firecracker reveals she took hormone drugs to make it happen. Homelander is grateful for the gift, and Firecracker takes him onto her lap and breastfeeds him. Huey and Annie replay Newman's speech about taking over a stupid America, and Annie wonders if she even knows about the plan for internment camps. Huey finally breaks, emotionally, over what Ashley did to him in the dungeon and the real trauma of his dad dying. Annie consoles him. Butcher and Joe roll in the materials that Samir needs to make the virus. Samir reveals that his holding out isn't loyalty to Newman. His lab discovered that the only virus strong enough to kill Homelander would be an unstable strain that would become a mass pandemic, killing anyone with Compound V in their system. He says that Butcher getting the virus is the proverbial, in the wrong hands, every scientist worries about at night. Becca appears and tries to talk Butcher out of genocide. But Joe is pressing Butcher to forge the silver bullet and commit to his original goal, killing every soup. When Joe starts yelling directly at Becca, it stops the show for Butcher, who realizes he's having a Fight Club Tyler Durden moment, and Joe is another figment of his imagination. Joe confesses that in reality, he was a colleague that Butcher left behind on a mission gone bad, who is now dead, and Butcher is using him as an avatar for his darkest qualities. Butcher replays all the scenes with Joe over the season, realizing he was alone. Joe says the tumor has screwed up Butcher's brain, and he was the persona that killed Ezekiel when Butcher blacked out. Joe drives the point home that his enthusiasm for wiping out the soups is actually Butcher's own bloodlust for it, and proclaims that Daddy's home, as Butcher's worst impulses are apparently now in control. Butcher is left sitting stunned and afraid.